Welcome one and all. For those that don't know me, my name's Tim Heale. This presentation is a cobble together of a few presentations that we used to give on the PSYOPs group many moons ago. And as we go through, I'll point out the different bits. But we used to run a PSYOPs course for group members and people that were deploying out onto operations. Part of this is that presentation. We also used to deliver to people that were doing operational stuff on the tactical level, which was where my main focus was. My main area of expertise is print and radio. And as we go through, I'll show you that. But before we start, just a few housekeeping notes. We're not expecting a fire alarm tonight. Should the alarm go off, there's an exit there, there's an exit there, and if that's blocked, you can get out the windows. Mobile phones, if you could put them to silent or switch them off, it'd be appreciated. Heads, toilets, I guess everybody knows where they are, down the corridor to the left. If anybody starts to snore, okay, don't panic. Just give them a gentle nudge. Questions. If you've got any questions as we go through, just stick your mitt up and ask them, or save it to the end. There'll be opportunity to ask questions as we go through or at the end. So without further ado, psychological operations, commonly known as propaganda, lies and deception. What I'm going to cover, the scope of this tonight is going to be the UK definition of what PSYOPs is, psychological operations. I'm going to go through a brief history of UK involvement in psychological operations and the good and the bad side of it. How we do it and why we do it. I'm going to go through that. Recent operations that we've done. What we've done in the past and how I did it. And how the group was set up originally. So the 15 UK Psychological Operations Group was set up in 1998, and I came onto the group in 99. So, a little bit about me. That's me. I was recruited onto the group in 1999. The group formed in the latter part of 1998, and I joined the group on the 1st of June 1999. In November 1999, I found myself going to Kosovo. That's also me. This happens to be Wellington's desk in Wellington's office in Horse Guards. And I do believe I've got a glass of champagne in my hand. I took a few liberties when I worked in London. I did 7 operational tours in psychological operations. I've done more operational tours than any other person in the British Forces. And I think that still stands to date because of the way that the group now has gone. People come in for a 2-year stint as opposed to myself. I did 10 years on the group. I came back from Afghanistan in 2009 and I was on full-time reserve service. The group didn't have a PID to put me into, so I had to move on or go back onto the reserve cadre. So I moved on and looked for some different jobs. That was me in Garmecia, in patrol rig. So, psychological operations is a weapon system. It's a long-term weapon system that's most effective over well-planned campaigns over time. And that's the crucial bit. it takes time to change people's attitudes and behaviour. And you'll see that as we go through. So the old saying is that Rome or Mecca wasn't built in a day, neither's changing people's ways of thinking. So that's the definition of UK psychological operations. Planned psychological operations directed at a known target audience to effect a change in attitude and behaviour to meet political and military objectives. In other words, it's a hearts and minds. It's changing people's way that they look at us, basically. History. We've got a long history in psychological warfare, going back to the Boar War. That was the first proper documented one, and yes, it didn't go well for us, actually. What we did, we were rather unkind to the Boers, and we interned several 100,000 of them. And that lot, 26,000 died in the camps. And it was our fault. And the international press had a field day at the time, saying how brutal the British regime, at that time, we still had a bit of an empire, and down in South Africa, and it was mainly to do with diamonds. Like all these things, it revolves around money. So that particular campaign for us was a negative. Then we come to the First World War. Now, there's lots and lots of documentary evidence of what was going on during the war, the way that we operated. It was trench warfare, and us, along with the Germans, used to send up balloons with leaflets, and we used to drop them over the opposite trenches, saying, "Give up, go home, you're not welcome here, and here's a safe conduct pass if you put your hands up and come across." That's the sort of thing that they were doing then. You can see they're getting ready to send up a balloon with stuff here, and they'd have to wait for the wind to go in the right direction to be able to send up the messages and drop them on the opponents. Going on, Second World War, we got the real hang of dropping paper. And it's a little known fact that the British dropped as much paper tonnage on the Germans than they did bombs. We were dumping tons and tons of paper on the Germans during the Second World War. That's a typical leaflet package getting loaded onto aircraft. By all accounts, the pilots didn't like dropping paper. They much preferred to drop a bomb because it had an immediate effect, whereas paper takes a bit of time to get read. We also developed around that time these, which are leaflet bombs, and they're fired out of artillery shells, basically. And it's a particular pattern shape of paper that's wound together. When it's fired out of these things, it does an airburst, and the paper then floats down in a particular pattern. Very similar to kicking leaflets out of an aeroplane. And we carried that on to this day. And I'll come into a little bit of that later. This is some of the propaganda that was around during the Second World War and beyond, and taking us up to sort of some of the present day stuff. There's old matey as Osama bin Laden. A lot of this stuff is all aimed at the Germans. Some of it's aimed at us. I mean, the Germans were doing similar to us. They had the opportunity to drop paper on us. Their propaganda machine was in full swing during the Second World War, as was ours. This guy, Sefton Delmer, I met his son. I organised for his son to come to the group to give a presentation on his father's career during the Second World War and what he was doing. He's a very fluent German. He spoke Prussian German. So, and this guy here, he was one of his characters that he called the chef or the chief. And he would go on the radio nightly. We had a big AM transmitter in the east of England that used to be able to reach across Germany. And he'd be broadcasting over this. Gustav Siegfried Eins was the call sign for this radio station. And any Germans that were caught listening to this were summarily sort of punished, basically. But he called Hitler that jumped up little Austrian corporal. And he used rather flowery language on him. But he was a great guy, learned a lot of lessons from the Second World War of what he was doing that we carried forward to today. And he mainly operated on what we call black psyops. There's three different types of psyops. There's white psyops, is what we do. We don't delve into the grey or the black, or maybe straight into the grey. But white psyops is known from an absolute known source pertaining to be who you are, directed at a known target audience. A grey psyops is you're putting out a message that you're not quite sure where it's come from. And then black psyops, you're pertaining to be somebody totally different. The problem with using black psyops is if you get caught, your credibility's gone, and it's really difficult to get that back again. But he was a genius at it. Malaya. Anybody here that did the Malaya conflict? Malaya was the insurgency of the communist Chinese infiltrating into Malaya, causing us lots of problems, trying to kick out the British, basically, getting rid of British rule in Malaya. And it was pretty much, the whole thing was a hearts and minds type operation. We'd have patrols go out into the jungle, into jungle villages where the insurgents were known to be coming down, and we would be giving them medical aid, we were giving them some assistance, we were trying to gather intelligence on what the insurgents were doing. And again, it used that hearts and minds psychological operations to keep the indigenous population on side. The Mau Mau campaign in Kenya. Again, the Mau Maus were a tribe that were trying to get rid of British rule in Kenya. And part of our, there was a team down there that was messaging them, trying to change their attitudes, trying to bring them on side, that the British Empire, still around at that time, was a good source. And eventually they got their independence. The Suez. Suez was another, it was a quick operation. We had messages going in. It didn't end well for France and us. I mean, we worked as a joint operation on there. Basically, the Egyptians had taken over the Suez Canal, blocking it, causing all sorts of dramas. They wanted to run the whole thing. They ended up doing it, I suppose. But it gave us a headache at the time. And the international world, the rest of the international community took a dim view of what we were trying to do. Borneo, again, that was insurgents, Chinese coming in, trying to influence the locals, trying to turn them into a communist country. Again, we had mainly, I think, on Borneo was SAS operations, going out, into the villages, doing the hearts and minds stuff, trying to keep up the message that they're better off with British rule in Borneo as opposed to having Chinese communists come in and et cetera, et cetera. And even today, I mean, Borneo, parts of it are communist. Hong Kong in 1967, there was a lot of unrest up on the border with the People's Republic of China and the Cultural Revolution that was going on there at the time. And we were sending messages across to the Chinese saying, keep your noses out. We've still got it till 1999, which I think was a bad thing that we gave it back. And what's happening in Hong Kong at the moment is terrible. Dhofar, 70-76, again, we sent a team out there that were helping the Omanis and the Dhofar Development Council. Mirbat, the SAS operation at Mirbat, where they got attacked by a load of the Yemen. Yeah, so the Yemenis insurgencies trying to take control of Oman. The Omanis didn't want it. British was in there. Predominantly, it was a sort of SAS sort of patrols up into the Jela Akdar, which is the mountain range, the Radfan. Yeah. So that was a fairly successful operation for us from that point of view. Falkland Islands. I know there's quite a few Falkland Islands vets. And there was a big deception plan going on before they went in to San Carlos Water. They had the ships going in at night time, bombing different parts of the islands. At the same time, they had this radio station that was broadcasting into the Falkland Islands. Hopefully the Argentinians were getting the message. It was also being picked up in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, telling them to stay out. We're coming. We all know how the Falklands ended up. Gulf War I, mainly led by the Americans. Once they got the Iraqis out of Kuwait, they were dropping these leaflets on them. This is what they call a safe conduct pass. And on the back of it, it was showing how to hand in, hold your leaflet up, have your weapon slung down by your side. You come over to us and we'll feed you, we'll look after you, we'll treat you nice. Basically, that's what it said. And again, if an Iraqi soldier was found with one of these leaflets on him, he could expect some fairly harsh treatment, shall we say, or even death. Oh, come back, come forward. Okay, so that's a bit of the history. So this is looking at a bit more into what psychological operations is all about. What we aim to do is to achieve a political or military objectives, which basically is influencing attitudes and behaviour of a known target audience. And the way we do it is truthful, attributable, culturally relevant. As long as we're using these, we can have an effect on that target audience. We do it through well-planned campaigns. And the way that we do that is we use lots of different medias. So we're using print facilities. We're using print production facilities to be able to juice leaflets, posters, handbills, newspaper ads, anything that will take a print media we'll use to our best effect. Whether it's dropping leaflets out of an aeroplane, and there's a bit of a science to dropping leaflets out of an aeroplane. The leaflet has to be a particular size and shape to be able to, once it kicks out and the box bursts open, it these bits of paper then fall in a particular pattern and fall a different way to cover an area that you want. And you work out what height you want it dropped to what area you want it to cover and how many leaflets it's going to take. I went to the German, I'll bring that one, I'll do that one a bit later. We did about radio and TV scripts that go for approval. Everything that psychological operations does has to be approved. And I'll take you through the approval process in a bit. So radio, television, internet, social media, any way that we can get a digital media out there, vocal media out there, visual media out there, we'll use. And we quite often outsource to local stations. So, for instance, in Afghanistan, we used 3 local radio stations in and around Lashkar to broadcast our messages out until we got our radio in a box, which is my little baby, and I'll come on to that in a bit. Targets audience analysis. This is crucial. This is what we need to do. We need to understand the culture. We need to get inside the people's heads that we're trying to influence. The Americans do this particularly badly. When we're doing pre-deployment training, we spend a lot of time in the INT looking at INT, getting the intelligence, looking at the target audience. We'll start with a country study, and then we'll drill down to the local area that we're going to, and we'll try and get into the minds of the people that we're trying to have an effect on. Just to make our campaigns more effective, basically. So the means that we use: academic reading. You start with a country study, which gives you the broad brush stuff, how many people live in the country, what the resources are in that country, and then you start digging down into the weeds to looking at whatever INSUMs are coming out, whatever G2 sources, and they can be varied. They can be electronic warfare, picking up stuff. They can be human teams out on the ground. They can be locals that have disaffected, that have come out and been interrogated or questioned, depends on which method you're using. We use focus groups. We use shuras in Afghanistan. I went out quite a few times on the ground and sat in on a shura to guide the commander that was running it, to ask the right sort of questions that we needed information on to be able to put together our campaigns. We use questionnaires. In Kabul, we sent out a newspaper, and I'll show you the newspaper in a bit, but also when the newspaper went out, we put in a questionnaire, and we had drop boxes where they could put the questionnaires, so they'd fill the questionnaires out with messages, and then we had an ink guy that did all the number crunching on it to gain what sort of information we needed to be able to make our campaigns more effective. We'll look at local news. We'll interview local people. We'll have tactical teams out on the ground. We'll use the human guys that have the agent handlers that will be out on the ground talking to the locals, running agents, giving them questions to get answered. We'll use electronic warfare. We'll listen into their ICOM chatter. And whatever source of information, we're just sponges for that information to be able to make our products more effective on the target audience. And that's the key at the end of the day, is making that, et cetera, et cetera. The more information we got, the better we can put together a product that will have an effect on the target audience. We support a commander's mission. Everything we do is directed at effects-based warfare. The commander has his mission, and we work to the commander. We put together a campaign that's effects-based that will deliver his mission. And that's the bottom line for what psychological operations does. And that's all we're trying to do, is change an attitude or a behaviour in a target audience. This is the most difficult thing, is to monitor the effect. Because it takes time, by the time you've started a campaign at the beginning of your 6 months tour, time you got to the end of your 6 months tour, you're just about starting to see some of the effect that you've had or not. And sometimes it's quite frustrating. You can work months and months and months on a project, on a particular village or something like that. You're just starting to get the locals on side. You're just starting to get their attitudes changed towards you. They're just starting to warm to you. Then you're leaving and you get, you've been with 3 Commando Brigade that get it, bound the ground, marks and mines, all over it. As you're moving out, 16 Blair Assault comes in with the paras with the big size 9s and screws up 6 months' work overnight. What changes attitude behaviour we're looking at? What do we want to achieve? That's the question. And that's got to be at the top. What do we want to do? What do we want to change with these people? What target audience we're looking at? And as much information on that target audience as we can get. It's all about information. And the timescale. Quite often, something will happen out in a bazaar and the ops officer or the plans officer comes running in. We need a campaign to stop something. Right, okay. What timescale? Nothing is urgent. We just don't do urgent. It's a long-term thing to change attitudes and behaviour. We can stick messages out about incidents that have happened and try and quell the population, but to change their attitudes and behaviour just takes time. This is one of the big things that we look at, unintended target audiences. When we're putting together a campaign, the messages that we're looking at, what effect on a different unintended target audience is that going to have? That's one of the key questions that we ask ourselves when we're going through the estimate process. This part is directed at troops that we delivered this presentation to. So imagine your troops are about to deploy out on an operation. We come along, we give you a bit of a brief on what psychological operations is, what we do, and what we want from these guys. So they're going to be our eyes and ears on the ground. We'll tell them about what questionnaires that we put out, how important those questions are that we get back as soon as possible. The quicker we can get the information, start crunching it, the quicker we can start working on the target audience. If they're going out on doing focus groups, if they're going out on a Shura where they're going into a village, they're going to be talking to the village elders. We need somebody to go out with them to sit on a Shura to be able to pull some strings, get some information, watch the body language, see what sort of effect we're having on that village. And that's where that comes in. Getting out, observing, seeing what's changed, if anything. And that's the bit that they really, really struggle with. You drop a bomb on somebody, you can see what it's done. Made a big hole in the ground and blown people to bits. You're trying to change somebody's attitude and behaviour, trying to measure that over time is difficult. And that's the problem that we have. Lots of people don't get how it works. And that's what we're looking for, feedback. When we're out on the ground, distributing products, seeing the sort of feedback, seeing the reaction of people, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, all that sort of thing adds into the big, big picture that we're trying to piece together. Recent operations that we've done. So the group from 1998, we went into Bosnia, we went into Kosovo, we went into Macedonia, we went into Sierra Leone, we went into Afghanistan, we went into Iraq, we went into Libya, we went into Syria. We also recently have had Turkey and Jordan. And I believe that we've got guys now in Ukraine. So some examples of the stuff that we did. In Bosnia, Bosnia Campaign ran from 98 to 2010. One of the main products that they did was this. It was a magazine that they put out, mainly directed at the youth in Bosnia, mainly the Serb population, I think it was. And it was just like a glossy magazine. Had all the sort of the pop star news at the time, celebrity news and bits and pieces like that. And we would put in subliminal messages, open messages. We would run a campaign, something like this. This is all about growing rather than shooting. And that went out as a poster, that went into that as well. The group didn't form until 2098. Yeah, but going back slightly, we've always dabbled in psychological operations, but until 1998, we didn't have a recognised form group. We had, there was a shadow group down at Ashford that was Inc Corps led, that were looking at psychological operations, and it was 2 officers. I think there was a lieutenant colonel and a captain at Ashford, Inc Corps types that were doing this. And there was somebody's vision that off the back of 91, the Gulf War, seeing what the Americans were doing, it took that amount of time for the UK PLC to form 15 UK Psychological Operations Group. And the group stood up in 98 and was starting to recruit, and that's when I was brought into the group. And my expertise at that time was print. I had my lorry driver ticket, so they had some trucks they needed people to drive, and they needed somebody with some background in print, and I had a bit of background in print, working on a single colour press occasionally, and doing some print stuff. We used to drop out leaflets. This is I4 for the OSEC, CE, and this was putting out their messages basically, and we were just a printing facility for that and a means of delivery. So guys would go out delivering these leaflets. Our piece of resistance in Bosnia was this, radio oxygen. There was a guy from the group, went out there in 1998, called David Bailey. He went out there, set a commercial radio station up, and that ran for the whole time they were there. And I think that the actual radio station now was handed over to the Bosnians, and it goes on to this day. Kosovo. A lot of people don't know that we still have a NATO presence in Kosovo. I think, as far as I'm aware, it's just up in Pristina at the headquarters that we had there eventually, Film City they called it. And I was there, so I got there in November '99, and I was there for 2 tours. This was the build up. This was a refugee camp prior to going in. And we had used all sorts of resources for the UNHCR to deliver in aid to help these people in the build up to troops actually piling into Kosovo. Again, this was to the start, it was a hearts and mind operation, getting the locals on side, having a bit of fun, a bit of downtime. When I got, one of the main products that I worked on was this particular operation, Op Trojan, and this was providing welfare and secure routes for the small Serbian population that was in Kosovo. Kosovo predominantly is ethnic Albanians, and there was an awful lot of atrocities on both sides. The Serbs carried out a lot of atrocities on the Albanians. The Albanians retaliated and did a lot. And our main task was, there was a few enclaves around Pristina where the Serbs lived, and our main focus was keeping them safe from attack from the Albanians, basically, or ethnic Albanians. And that was one of the things that we did. We also did a newspaper for them we called the Serb Telegraph, and we used to deliver that out. And there was a Swedish battalion that was in Gracanica, which was the main enclave of the Serbs, and they did a lot of the work for us. Sierra Leone. Pretty brutal place at the time. You got this clan here, West Side Boys. This guy was a bit of a coward, got these big rough-looking boats to do his dirty work for him. While they was out fighting, he would be hiding somewhere. I think they finally caught up with him. And that was the UNAMSIL was the operation in Sierra Leone. And that was all centred around the diamond mines, and the West Side Boys were part of the problem. Task Force Harvest, anybody remember that? Macedonia, 2001. We went in there. That's the commander of the 16 Blair Assault Brigade, Barney White Spanner. And next to him is a Danish general who commanded the operation. And I took that picture. I stood at the back there pretending to be press. We got in there 3 weeks prior to the Blair Assault Brigade. This picture here, they were handing in weapons up in a place called Radusha, which is up in the hills. Little story there. I was doing something. I said, somebody come running and said, "Grab your camera kit, you need to go now." I just need to grab my Bergen or my day sack that had my essentials in. "No, you haven't got time. You'll be back this afternoon. You need to shoot up there and get some pictures." 3 days later, all I got is my camera bag. And lucky for me, the Paras took a bit of a liking to me, and they kind of give us some food and a bit of shelter. But I took this image when they were handing it in, and I brought it back down because the press weren't allowed up there at the time. And this went out on the wire, and I don't know whether anybody managed to see it in. It got picked up in most of the big broadsheets and the tabloids at the time, and I got the byline for it. Sergeant Heale. That was the team we took out. These are our 2 trucks. One was a print wagon, one was a radio station. We had 2 interpreters. This guy was the Macedonian. This guy was the ethnic Albanian. This guy see what he's dressed in? 3 months we was out there, didn't change his clothes once. He was a struggle working with in the heat. On this operation, we had an RQ looked after our life support, 2 ink guys, captain that I worked with a lot of the time, our illustrator. We had a Belgian guy working with us that was helping out the ink guys. We had a wing commander in charge of the team. We had a colonel in charge of the radio side. We had a squadron leader and a captain of Marines. We went in there heavy. It was a short 90-day operation. We was in there for a little bit longer because we got in there beforehand. And most of the stuff that we did was for the newspapers. Our illustrator there used to do some fantastic cartoons, all designed to influence the local population. We did a first. Have you seen the RDS radios that you have in your car? And it says what station you're on and stuff like that. Over in this country, it's a static. In Macedonia, they don't have the same rules as us. You can have it scrolling. So we managed to get a message put out onto this that said, NATO, the mission continues. And that was the underlying phrase for our side of the operation. And this is some of when we were doing the weapons collection, you had a weapons specialist, an ATO, that was taking in the weapons, clearing the weapons. So they would all line up with their weapons, come stick it into the pit. They'd clear the weapon, make sure it was safe before we took it off them. And what we did, we bagged it up, and then it went off and got destroyed. They also added this in, flat tires and all sorts. This is something that they'd nicked off of the Macedonian forces at one stage in one of the scraps they had. That's some of the weapons that they handed in. They're not fantastic weapons by any stretch of the imagination. They weren't the best weapons that they gave in, but we put a lot of them on display. And I don't know whether anybody recognises that guy or this guy down here, international press guys. I can't remember his name. Charles, is it? Charles somebody. Anyway, we had lots of international press coming while we were on this particular operation. A lot, the likes of Kate Adie and stuff like that. Moving on to my first tour of Afghanistan in 2002. I was actually in Macedonia when 9/11 kicked off. We had a little Daewoo Mets that we ran around in. A couple of the guys had gone into Camp Able Sentry to the PX to do a bit of shopping. I just sat in the car and I was listening to the radio, and it came over the radio that something, a plane had flown into the World Trade Center. Thought that doesn't sound good. So I shot in, grabbed the guys. We shot back to camp. We had a big ops room, it was about the size of this, and they had a big TV screen up and desks all over the place. And as we got into the ops room, we were stood down and we saw the second plane going to the Twin Towers. And we had some Americans in the room. Well, if they had their way, we wouldn't have had a planet left. They wanted to go and nuke everybody. Radio product. Anybody speak Pashto? Neither do I. Imagine how difficult it was for me to edit that sort of thing. And I did a lot of that, editing stuff that I don't understand. This is a team that we had out in Kabul in 2002. There's your gorgeous self there. This is Saeed. This is Mohammed Jr. This is John Baptiste de Clouseau. He was a French Commodore or The French system was, I think it was a captain adjutant. Wassi, this guy, Wassi Anwar, he used to go out and pray about 20, maybe 25 times a day. I'd be working away. Where's Wassi? Oh, he's gone to pray. In fact, he was round the back of the tent having a fag. Tanya Sweeney, Australian major, she'd headed up the team. So we were a multinational team out in Kabul. Mohammed Senior, Del Boy, he was our life support guy. He made sure that we got all the resources that we needed to do what we needed to do. He was a bit of a fixture around borrowing stuff. And Jimmy Powell, he was our ink guy. He did all our number crunching. We sent out thousands and thousands of questionnaires with the ISAF news.
You've got a lot of mixed up sort of everywhere together.
Oh, it is. You just get on with it.
Who decides who's going to be?
Well, back in 2002, and I'll come on to this in a bit. I'll show you the makeup of what the group looked like. But essentially, the PSYOPs group at that time was 28 reservists and 8 regulars. So it was the three of us were reservists, basically. We borrowed a French guy. He was a diamond, actually. We were dry. Effectively, the headquarters were dry. However, the French managed to get booze in. And he came up with this, I mean, absolutely stunning bottle of Napoleon cognac. And he showed us how to properly drink it. He brought the glasses and everything, so we putting tipples in this. And when we finished work, we worked really hard. We started about 7 o'clock in the morning, finishing about 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, most days there, because we had so much to do. And I'll go and bear that in a minute. But he also got us some cases of beer that we took. The boss and myself went up to Bagram to see the Australian SAS because she needed a few favours doing. So the beer was sort of a token of thanks, and they'd do anything for us. So a bit around the city of Kabul. I mean, this is the way that the Russians have kind of left it. We had some new kit brought in, and it came in on this giant Antonov, massive, great thing. We got out there, and I'll show the kit that we got out there with when we originally went out. But the problem with Afghanistan at that time in 2002 and the later operations, everything pretty much had to be flown in, which doesn't sound too much of a nightmare. They did the Berlin airlift with a lot smaller aircraft. But everything we had to come in by air. So it was trying to get stuff on airframes. This is the sort of product that we had. I flew into Kabul in early January 2002. And I'm sat on the aircraft, a C-17, and it came over the Tannoy that we're going to be coming, we're approaching Kabul. We're going to turn out all the lights. We're going to have to do a tactical landing into Kabul airport. Anyway, all the lights went off. We've got our body armour on and all the rest of it. They're throwing this plane around, you're getting bounced all over the place. All of a sudden, bang, he's hit the deck. Backed up. And all you see was this little torch off the back doing this. So we got off the back with all our kit, followed this guy into this little tent. First thing he said to us is, don't step off the yard standing. We haven't cleared all the mines yet. Well, I'm thinking, what have I done this time? Anyway, this was one of the leaflets that we produced fairly early on about mines in the area of the airport. This is a setup I had. I had a little iMac. I had a bastardised Windows machine that we put Arabic windows on to be able to print off Arabic script with Pashto fonts. It's a real nightmare. And then we're working on this newspaper. We called it the ISAF News. That's it there. And we printed off stuff, cut it out, stuck it down. And once we got it all put together, that's kind of what it looked like. This is a little bit further down the line. This is how we handed it over to the Turks in the June. But we had to paste it all up like that. And then we printed it off onto a trace. The trace went off to the printers downtown and they printed it up for us. Yeah, this is local commercial printers. I mean, we didn't have the resources. I mean, the first couple we did, and this is the later equipment that they sent out. So they sent this tough book out, and it had 250 kilobits of RAM, which is just about enough to fire the machine up and use one application. So I could only use either Photoshop, and then I had to switch that off, and then pull up Adobe Audition if I was doing some editing on a radio script. Bit of a nightmare. And then we went out with the local infantry battalion, which was our 1st Battalion, Royal Anglian Regiment. They took us out on the ground, and we used to go and deliver this newspaper. And pretty much everywhere we went, we got mobbed. We had the radio station out there, and we had the guys recording some stuff that we put out to radio, television, Kabul. And they were sending out some of our messages. So this is, again, us out on a patrol. English, Pashto and Dari. So it was a tri-language newspaper with good news stories in it, basically. I got the opportunity to go and interview quite a lot of people, important people at the time. I interviewed Hamid Karzai, Ashraf Ghani, the Minister of the Hajj, and 2 or 3 other ministers. And I'll show you in a bit a lady that was a minister or a councillor or something like that. And I've done Richard Stokes as well, yeah. And Peter Wickham Martin. That's the Shah's Palace. It looks nice from there, but it's blown out. The Americans dropped a J-dam on it, apparently, and it's a right mess. This is out on a patrol again, delivering out the ISAF news. This is coming down one of the streets in Kabul. They just get mobbed all the time with kids. And this is in the later stages. The earlier stages, we were in Kabul, there was hardly anybody on the streets. I mean, we could move around the city fairly easily. By the time we left in the June, there was traffic jams everywhere. The situation had eased off, and it was crazy. This is a little operation. We had a problem in a couple of the police areas in Kabul with a lot of crime going on. So we came up with this plan, called it Op Parker. There's one of the signs that we used. We had these made up locally. Where we could, we used local resources, get the Afghans to do stuff for us. And we came up with this design, the all-seeing eye, and basically it was a crime, stop crime, report it, etc., etc. So it was a reasonably well resourced campaign, and we had some success from it. Not a great deal, but some. 2006. This is the next time I went out to Afghanistan. So you can see the old team all got beards. The new team are all sort of shiny faced. So on here we've got this is Hammy. He's a friend of mine. He's here now. He's been here since 2014. He came out sort of towards the end of the war. his brother and father were killed just recently looking for him. Bismillah, he managed to get out in November. He's here now in a hotel at the moment. They're waiting to get housed with his family. They were treated fairly roughly on the way out as well. Dawish, he's in America, by all accounts. Arif, I don't know where he is, and I haven't heard anything, and these guys don't know, haven't heard from him either. But he moved up the ranks. He started off working for us. He was my script writer, and he wrote a lot of the scripts for. We put a radio program together called the Afghan Archers, and what we did, we looked at what was going on in the local area. I would give him a brief on what we were looking for. He would write the script in Pashto, then translate it back into English. This is where the problem starts. It works really well in Pashto, but you translate it back into English, it doesn't read much sense. I mean, you get a gist of it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. So the first one I did, the first script I sent up for approval, and I think we've got it, yeah. So what we do, we put together what we call a product action worksheet, and that's what it looks like. So it's got the title of what we're doing, a serial number, what it's there to do, and then what we want from it, and it says what sort of product it needs to be. And then it goes forward for approval. So it gets internal approved first with the boss, and then it goes up to Legad, Polad, the Merc commander, and then the commander himself has to sign off. Anything that we're doing, it was everything that we did. So any news article, something like that, had to go forward and get signed off. We got it changed. Just the pure new stuff just could go out. It was only stuff that was looked at doing a part of the campaign that was trying to change an attitude or behaviour that he needed to sign off at. So the first script went up, and it didn't read well. It came back about 20 minutes later, red penned. I said, what's this? He said, it doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to. So I found myself in front of the commander to explain myself what we're doing and the way that we've done it, and why it doesn't make a lot of sense. But you can get the gist of what the program's about. But it does make sense in Pashto. So once they got the idea of how we worked and the way it worked, he was fine with it. So it wasn't really changing attitudes and behaviour, but it was highlighting stuff that was going on. So if there had been a bomb in the marketplace, we would follow it up with a couple of guys coming down to the market and saying how terrible it was, and somebody should report those that were perpetrating. So that's that sort of thing that we were working on. I did 2 episodes. You remember I said about I interviewed a woman that was up in Kabul in 2002 at the lawyer Jurga. This lady here, her name was Fazia, and she was couldn't quite get the gist of whether she was a minister or whether she was a councillor, but she was something like that. She was fairly, I mean, she was well-to-do, and she actually spoke at the lawyer Jurga, which was pretty much unheard of. Women, the society was, but she was an exception to the rule. I met her down in Kabul, in Lashkar in 2006, at the Women's Centre. And they agreed to come into camp to record an episode of the Afghan Archers. And it was hilarious. There's all my recording equipment. We sat around there for about 4 hours talking through this particular episode that we were going to do, how they were going to do it, etc., etc. And then when we recorded it, it took 10 minutes. One hit, boom, done. But it was a big operation to get them into the camp because we had to black out the windows on this van and put screens up so they could come into the building, and the same on the reverse. And then we did the same a couple of weeks later. This time they brought in a sewing machine and they brought in bits and pieces, and they'd kind of put the script together. We give them a brief. Arif did the script and worked with them. So this is Arif sat here. He's got a script there, so they were making notes and worked brilliantly. And we got a lot of feedback from that particular episode when it went out. Very, very few people in the PRT in Lashkar were invited into the Terps compound for lunch, but I was a regular for lunch and dinner. Unfortunately, I got my feet on the table. But they forgave me that. Yeah, it is a bit, but I couldn't get down on my knees. And they were quite happy with that, so they kind of looked after me. So I was with 3 Commando Brigade, had a great tour, and this was 2 days before I left Afghanistan. They sent me out on a patrol 2 days before I'm due to fly home into one of the dodgiest areas in Lashkar. This is, I don't know whether you can remember back to when we were fighting a place called Nadi Ali. This is Nadi Ali. And the next rotation that went out, the rotation after, one of our people, Sarah Bryant, was killed going to this place. She was blown up with some SAS guys that we were working with. The only person we've lost on the group. Iraq in 2003. I went out in 2004. And I had a pretty tough time. This is one of the products that we put together that went down really well. And this went into newspapers, it went up onto billboards and made big stuff, and it went all over the place. And basically that's the translation of it. And it was just trying to get these elements to work in Iraq at the time. My main focus in Afghanistan, in Iraq, was to try and build up the credibility of the Iraqi police service. I'll let that sink in. My main focus was the Iraqi police service and trying to boost their standing in the local population. It was like running into a brick wall. It was a real challenge to come up with a campaign that would work. And I spent a lot of time going around southern Iraq, seeing police chiefs and all manner of places, trying to get this campaign off the ground. Yeah. I'll show you my interpreter. You remember the 6 RMPs that were killed in what's the place? They were killed in that room there. This was a horrible, horrible place. The whole village. There was you go into a place and you get this horrible feeling. You get tingles up your spine, and you're thinking, oh, "I'm not comfortable here." And we were handing this place over to the Iraqi police service. I flew up to Baghdad for a weekend to attend the countrywide PSYOPs operators convention, for want of another word. It was run by the Americans. So we flew up to Baghdad, me and the boss. We flew into Camp Victory and met the guys, and they put us in a small low building, a bit like this, but with a flat roof. And you could go up on the roof, and they got one of these pot fire things that we're going to have some near beers in the evening. They took us down. We were going to go down to the green zone down to the main headquarters in Iraq, where everything happened in the main bit of the city. As we came to the gate at Victory, this other convoy pushed out in front of us, 2 Humvees and a pickup truck. We were in 2 pickup trucks. So we let them go. Halfway into Baghdad, there's a massive explosion just up in front of us. The front Humvee copped the back of it, and one guy was killed in there. The 3 guys that was in the pickup truck weren't. They were dead. And the guy on top cover got some shrapnel in the rear Humvee. We came on literally 30 seconds behind them. If we'd have gone out front, that would have been us. Within a minute, there was a helicopter came down, the crew dived out, told us to get going. We carried on into the green zone. We were stuck outside the green zone because they heightened the security to get into the place. So we're sat out really, really vulnerable. But we managed to get in eventually. Scariest moments I've had for a long time. Got back to Victory late afternoon, early evening, had some scran, and we were up on top of this building having a few near beers, which are disgusting, by the way, during the fact with the hosts. And all of a sudden, a burst of about, 40 rounds of 5.0 came over our heads and slammed into the gate, which was about 200 yards further on from us, and killed a guy on a Sanger. The following day, we were waiting to get on the aircraft to leave, and you can see that's the colour of the place. It was orange. The sandstorm was coming, and this guy is calling us. We're getting the old military tourism shots, like, and he's trying to get us onto the aircraft. Got on the aircraft, just took off. They closed the airport. Had we mucked about a little bit more, we'd have missed getting off and would have been there for a week. Not a lovely place. This is out in Alamara. This is another village to the sort of east of Basra. Another really dodgy place. We were out on a patrol with the Iraqi police service, seeing how they were operating, see how we could. Yeah. We had to fly into there because the road move was a bit dodgy, and we spent a couple of days up there interviewing the police chiefs and going out on patrols with them, stuff like that. Horrible place. Nasiriyah, up in sort of halfway to Baghdad, were the Italians, and we worked with the Italians up there. The Italians were in this town, and they took us out. We liked staying. I spent quite a bit of time with the Italians because they had some really nice wine and food. They were really good cooks. That's No Fell. He was my interpreter. He went everywhere with me. Really good guy. He's now an air traffic controller in Australia.
He got out because.
Yeah, because it was dangerous for him to live there. This is another sort of product that we were producing in Iraq. This is reporting terrorism, basically. So again, we use this logo with a New Life, New Iraq, and that's the type of product that we were pushing out. It didn't have a fantastic reception, but it's what it is. Any questions so far? Anybody bored? Anybody gone to sleep yet? Am I speaking too quickly? Okay, moving on then. This is where the target audience analysis comes in. This is where you work on getting to know the target audience.
I was generally thinking
Yeah.
Not children.
Yeah. And
so I thought, you telling them terrorists
it's what the commander's mission is what they want. Do we need a wet break? Okay. We'll mark time then. Now, anybody else want to dive their heads? Questions while we're waiting?
One of the things you said quite early on is things had to go up the line.
Yep. Yes.
How far up the line?
The commander. Yeah, I mean, when I was in Kabul, it went to the Major General. Fortunately, I knew him, Major General John McCall. He was a Royal Anglian. He served with a battalion in Celle. So I've met him before, and I was just a young sergeant at the time. And in fact, I had to go and explain my script to him. Once I discussed the script, he totally got it and let us run with most of the stuff. If we had a tight deadline, I could just go and knock at his door, say, "Sir, can you have a quick look at this? We need to get it down to the printers to get it out on time." No problem at all. He absolute diamond geezer. So, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, no, it was actually produced. It was a NATO operation, so it had I4, produced by I4. Everybody knew that was what I say. It was produced by us, and it was, everybody knew it was from us, and they knew that it was our slant on stuff. Basically, it was just good news stuff. It's not like the mainstream press, the mainstream media get here. It's all doom and gloom. No, everything we put forward was upbeat, was good news. It was celebrity stories. They liked all of that sort of thing. So that's the sort of thing that we did. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we did that in Macedonia, funny enough, because it's an established country. It was a fairly stable country. The problem with Macedonia was you had the ethnic Albanians wanted their language recognised in the country, and that's what that whole thing was all about. That's why we went in to take the weapons off of them. They agreed to hand over the weapons. They would have their language recognised in the country. We went in to take 3,500 weapons, which took out 3,852 weapons, I think, in the end. So from that perspective, it was deemed a successful operation. It wasn't. There was radio, television, Kabul, and it was effectively a TV station. It went out for about a couple of hours a day. The problem that we had in 2002 in Kabul is it had been under the Taliban for quite a few years. They controlled what media there was. There wasn't a huge amount of power in the city. There was problems with power outages, and it still is to a certain degree. It had stabilised over the years, but I fear that it's reverting back to times gone by. The difference now is that they've had 20 years of a fairly stable time in Afghanistan. You've got a whole generation that have grown up in a fairly stable environment. And particularly now, girls in Afghanistan that have had that freedom for the last 20 years have just had the rug pulled from under them. And those are the ones I really, really feel sorry for. So, yeah, it's watching that unfold when we extracted out of, when Biden pulled the rug from under, it was heartbreaking to watch. They only had, the Americans only had 2,500 troops in there supporting the ANA with air power. Anyway.
Just get Americans.
They only had 2,500 troops in there.
At the end.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they had in there, and that's what they were going to pull out. They would fly in. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were supplying air support basically to the Afghan National Army, and Afghan security services, and once that support had gone, the Taliban just run rife and put a fear of God into the ANA. I mean, don't get me wrong, the ANA are really good fighters. They're lazy buggers. I mean, trying to get them up in the morning and get them out on a patrol was hard work. But when they were out on a patrol, they were good. I mean, they understood what was going on. And so, yeah. Why did they give in? Don't know. It's trying. I mean, I spent months and months and months looking at the Pashtun, trying to get inside their mindset. It almost sent me doolally. It really did. It's really, really difficult understanding Afghan culture, because one village will be fighting another village, but if somebody else picks on one of the villages, they'll come together to fight off his enemy. It's a bizarre. It's tribal. It's warlords, and it's a really, really difficult culture to understand, which is why we spent a lot of time doing the target audience analysis, and we were having lots and lots of successes down in Garmassia in the south. My main focus, my last two tours, was on radio products, producing radio. We were paying local radio stations to send out this stuff, and they weren't doing a particularly good job. I mean, their reach wasn't great, and we weren't getting a lot of feedback, which is why we brought in what we call radio in a box. It's a box about that sort of size. It's got a media player in it. It's got a mixing desk, and it's got a 50-watt transmitter that hooks up to an antenna. And then you put a laptop on the top of it, you plug it in, you put together a radio program, some music, some jingles, some messages, some news, press play, and you broadcast. Down in Garmassia, my predecessor had gone down there, put this radio down there, and it wasn't working. They press play, and you couldn't get it outside the compound. So I went down and had a look at it. It just needed retuning. What she'd done I don't know what she'd done with the antenna, but it was too short. So I put it at the right height, because you have to measure the height of the antenna to the frequency that you're pushing out on. So I got that sorted out, and about 15 kilometres south of the town of Garmassia, they had a line of patrol bases, and we got the guys down there to listen out, told them what time we were broadcasting. We started pushing out this first day. We'd just gone for a test. We were playing some music, putting out a couple of sort of news items, and it was reaching down sort of 15 kilometres away. Great. That afternoon, a couple of guys came to the gate of the camp with bits of paper. It was a scary time for the guys on the gate, but these two guys came up with bits of paper asking if they could have a song played for them and their friends. We went live the following morning, and we mentioned that these two guys and their friends, and this is the song that we played, because we were playing mainly Indian or Pakistani music. because that's all we could get. They loved it. That the rest of that day, there was a stream of blokes coming with bits of paper. So this had gone on for about 2 or 3 days, and we got all these blokes coming up with bits of paper asking for songs to be played for their friends. So I thought it'd be quite a ruse if we put in a couple of girls' names. Say, my brother's, I've asked my brother to bring this in. Can you play this particular song for me and my girlfriends? Well, bugger me. The next day, we got a dozen letters from girls. And that's the effect that we had over the space of just a few days. And that was positive feedback. And I took back with me a stack of paper like that when I went back up to Lash and said, this is the effect that we've had down in Garmacia. Anyway, moving on. A 15 Cyprus group. Going to look at how the unit was worked and how it was set up when I was there from 99 to 2009. The group's orbat looked like this, and it started off with 39 regulars, 28 reserves, and it was tri-service reserves, which we had all sorts, and 2 civilian staff, which were the secretaries in the office. They did all our admin for us. It swelled to 55 regulars and stayed at 28 reserves. I ended up sitting there, effectively a colour sergeant in charge of the radio section. So we had the CO, who was a colonel, a commander, or a wing commander. So it was tri-service. So the headquarters, the CO rotated. The 2 IC, again, was squadron leader, lieutenant commander, or major. And then we had an adjutant in there as well. We had an RQ. This is our life support side. So the admin assistants, drivers and support network. So REMI was in there. We had a few REMI guys. We had SO2, which was, again, tri-service. It's all tri-service, these posts, the regular posts, and the reserve. So it's all tri-service. So the ops and plans was this side, and the inside grew massively. I believe now there's somewhere about 20 in staff that work all the time. And then this comes over to the ops support side. So we've got the three elements: radio, print, TV, and then we've got the reserve side, which takes in the tactical psyops. So that's basically as the group was set up in probably 2006. Yeah, there you go. That was all about in 2006. It has grown since. It's moved and it's become what I now term 77 Brigade. Print production. So there's Jimmy, our illustrator. They brought all this new equipment. Procurement is a real bugbear. They give you a load of money and say, re-equip yourselves. Not quite that easy. You have to go to the procurement guys at Bristol, Abbeywood, and they ask you a concept. You have to give them a concept of what you want to achieve. And then they'll come back and give you a load of stuff that they think that you need to do the job with. They don't ask you what you need to do the job with. Doesn't work like that, apparently. So what you end up with is a load of stuff that is over-engineered. This was our first lot of kit. We had 2 of these wagons that had print in the back, and one of them was a radio station. Fantastic kit, procured originally from Ultra Electronics. I mean, it was way over-engineered. I mean, see in the back. So we got a high rate printer. We worked on Macs at that time, which was great for graphic work. And then we got the world's biggest guillotine for chopping up paper. And the idea is that we would produce stuff on here. So if we were doing an airdrop leaflet, print it out on here, cut it up on there, and then it'd go off and get packed to where it was going to be dropped. This is the equipment that they gave us. I mean, an A3 scanner, a tough book. Tough books. When they first came, they set up a room like this. They gave us all these brand new tough books. They got the Adobe Suite loaded onto them, fired it up. That's the operating system open. Right, great. Open up. Photoshop. Nothing. These tough books had 128 meg of RAM on them, which was barely enough to open up I think it was Windows 98 at the time. Could barely run that. They upgraded it to 256 and it just about, I mean, it was barely steam driven, but it's what we were lumbered with. They gave us some great vehicles. Pin scale 6x6, brilliant bit of kit. Great load luggers. That's the flight kits and the fly cases with all that equipment. So it's all the flyaway capability. Used it to great effect to go and pick up stuff, lug stuff about. So this is what they gave us for a print section. This is just one section. So you got high output printers. You've got a big scanner. You've got a big laminating machine. And then you've got a cutter, which was barely man enough to do the job. We said, can we have the one out the back of the truck? No, they're going. Yeah, there was lots and lots of bad decisions. This is delivering out our print capability. So we've used helicopters to do it, C-130s. I've done a few leaflet drops over Afghanistan. It's brilliant. Get a box like that, a couple of boxes like that. You get several thousand in, and you've got a bit of rope that goes through the box, and you kick it out, and it's on a strop, and the box goes out, pulls, and you go poof, massive, great big fan of paper, and you see it all just sort of falling in a nice, lovely pattern. You think, good job there. Radio. Now, because I was head of radio section, and I needed to get my guys trained up, I'd been out and done a tour of Afghan, so I've got a really good idea of running a radio. So I talked to the guys down at BFBS and a couple of other people, and I asked them if we can put a little package together to show the guys how to run a radio station. So we've got this radio studio, all singing, all dancing, loads of different types of media, brilliant for recording. Got the trucks, that's the radio truck. And then there's Saeed and Mohammed again, up in Kabul. We did some really good work that we put out up there. We had this massive masts. We had these dishes. And this was the setup that we had in Kosovo, up at Film City. And the radio station was down in Pristina. Radio training. So I designed this radio training with the guys from BFBS, and we decided what the brief was going to be. So we were going to produce a product, and the product was going to be a radio product. So remember I showed you the pause earlier? So we came up with the mission, what we needed to achieve. We came up with what we needed, what target audience was, etc., etc. So radio ad. And this radio ad had to include quite a few items to sell this product. So we've got the brief, and the product that we had to come up with this radio ad was so at the start of the week, we got the brief, we went through the whole process and got the script approved to be recorded it, edited it, and the finished product is, now, if you listen to the ad, see if you can work out what we had to include in the brief, okay? And the next question is, would you go out and buy the product?
Good evening, Horace. Ooh, what is that long, hard object in your trouser pocket?
Daphne, you spotted my new wiffle bar. Would you like to get your hands on it?
Why, yes, Horace, I would love to peel your wiffle out of its one-handed, easy-to-use, unique wrapper.
Oh, easy, Daphne. Don't get overexcited. You know how uncontrollable you can get.
Oh, Horace! I can't wait to get my mouth on your wiffle and taste its lightly whipped mousse centre surrounded by that brittle, hard chocolate exterior.
Why, Daphne, at only 75p a bar, you could suck and nibble on my wiffle all night long.
Horace, give me your wiffle now!
Oh, Daphne, oh.
Wiffle bars, the naughty way to enjoy quality chocolate. Go on, treat yourself. So, did you work out what we had to include in this this advert? So, you've got to be able to open it with one hand. It's got a firm chocolate exterior, soft interior. It's only 75p a bar. So, although it got past the internals, we don't think it would have got past the. But that took the best part of a week to produce. And that's looking at all the elements that we've gone through before. So looking at the target audience, trying to work out which demographic would go and buy this, et cetera, et cetera. And we just had a lot of fun just doing it.